The woman stood barefoot in the red dirt, head bowed, sack drawn tight over her skull like a burlap noose. Sweat had soaked the coarse fabric down her neck, but she didn't shift, didn't cry. Just stood there, wrists bound by twine like something plucked from a cattle pen. Around her the crowd buzzed, not shocked, not scandalized, just amused. It was auction day in Dell Hollow, and the sheriff's men said she owed $4 for loitering plus $2 for indecency. Couldn't pay, then she'd be sold. The bidding started at 5, but no one bid. The town had seen its share of drifters and madwomen. No one wanted trouble stitched in a sack. That's $6 of fine humanity, barked Sheriff Dunley, thumbing his belt. Come now, gentlemen, least she can work. A few boys hooted. One woman hissed. Don't look right, she muttered to her husband. That ain't proper. The man didn't answer. The silence swelled thick and pitiless. Then a figure moved near the back, long shadow, wide hat, dusty boots like hooves on dry bone. He walked slowly, as if remembering each step as he took it. A scar coiled around his throat like a rope burn, and his hands were blackened knuckles shiny with old fire. No one knew his name, though they called him Tom. Just Tom. He hadn't spoken in years. He pulled a silver dollar from his coat and held it up. The coin caught the sun like a pistol flash. The crowd laughed. $1, someone jeered. He wants her. Tom stepped forward, dropped the dollar into the sheriff's hand, then approached the woman. She didn't move. Her breath came steady under the sack. Gently, he cut the twine around her wrists. He didn't speak. She didn't look up. Together, they walked out of Dell Hollow. The trail back to Tom Callister's land was narrow, brushed with sage, and lined by brittle cottonwoods that leaned like watchers. He didn't speak, didn't glance behind to see if she followed. Yet he slowed just enough for her to keep pace. It was 6 miles through dry hills and scorched prairie to his ranch, a skeleton of wood and stone clinging to the edge of nothing. The wind never stopped up there. It howled through the canyons like a voice caught in its own echo. Tom had lived alone since the fire. Folks didn't talk about it much anymore. Most had forgotten the details or chosen to. They remembered smoke over the hills, the way his hands came back, blackened fingers twisted like scorched roots. He'd once had a family, a wife named Miriam, a boy, Levi. Neither had been found in the ashes. He built what he could from what didn't burn. A one-room cabin with a bedroll in the corner and a rusted stove that hissed when it rained. He had a well, a mule, 3 chickens, and a mare that refused to bear foal. Every day he walked the same pattern, feed, fix, mend, remember. The only thing out of place in all those years was now this woman standing quiet by the door like she'd always been there. He didn't ask her name, didn't lift the sack. He pointed to the barn. She nodded, stepped inside, and came back with a bucket of water. She drank slow, then washed her arms, her hands. Never the face. That sack stayed on like a second skin. The days passed without words. She swept the porch, tended the hens, boiled water when he limped in from a fall. He didn't stop her. Some nights she'd hum low, sad songs shaped like wind over graves. Once Tom found her sitting beside Levi's old toy horse, her fingers brushing the wood like a prayer. He watched her from the shadows, breathing dust and memory. The pain in him was not fresh, but it was rooted too deep to rot. He started setting an extra plate at the table. She ate slowly, hands trembling under the sack. Once she reached for the bread and her wrist showed a long scar, pink and curved like a snake bite. He didn't ask. On the 7th night, the coyotes came close, yipping at the chickens. Tom rose, rifle in hand, and stepped into the dark. She followed barefoot on cold dirt. When he fired, the shot echoed off the ridges. 1 coyote dropped. The rest fled. But the woman didn't flinch. She stared out into the dark as if waiting for something to come back. That night he found her singing to herself a lullaby in a voice so cracked and soft it made his chest feel hollow. She turned toward him when she felt him watching. For the first time she spoke. "Thank you." It wasn't loud, it wasn't broken. Just 2 words as simple and quiet as rain. He didn't answer. Just nodded and walked away. That night he didn't dream of fire. For the first time in years, Tom Callister slept with both hands unclenched. She never once asked where she was nor who he was. Her days unfolded like muscle memory, tending to chores she was never taught. Feeding hens, hauling water, washing clothes with lye so rough it burned her knuckles raw. Tom didn't ask why she stayed. He didn't ask what lay beneath the sack. Whatever past she carried, it wasn't any heavier than his own. But he began to notice things. Her posture stiffened at the sound of horses. Her hands worked fast, but always with one ear tuned behind her. At night she sat near the stove, but never slept near it. Cold seemed safer to her than fire. The name she hadn't spoken followed her like a shadow. Tom never pressed. She never offered. They lived in that quiet rhythm, one foot after another, never looking back. Still the sack wore thinner. In the morning light, he sometimes saw a silhouette beneath narrow, chin-high cheekbones. Once when she bent over to pick up a fallen pot, the bottom slipped for half a breath. He glimpsed her neck bruised deep old. He turned away. Spring broke over the hills with a reluctant green. Tom repaired a fence down by the south gully, and she brought him water and biscuits wrapped in cloth. He offered her a nod. She sat nearby, arms wrapped around her knees. This land, she said, once feels far from something. He didn't ask what. One day he handed her Levi's old boots. Too small for him to wear, too big for a child who would never walk again. She slid them on. They fit. On the 23rd day he caught her humming again, this time louder. A song not meant for children, not a lullaby. It was old Appalachian, maybe something about rivers and revenge. He froze in place, holding the reins to his mule. He knew that tune. He'd heard it years ago in a saloon in Black Mill before everything turned to fire. A woman sang it backed by fiddle and stomping boots. That voice had been younger than wild and laughing, but the melody hadn't changed. Neither had the edge in it. That night she boiled potatoes and left a slice of salted meat beside his plate. She paused before sitting. "You know it, don't you?" she asked. Tom didn't look up. He stared at the firewood, counting each log like a confession. "I knew someone who used to sing it," he said. She didn't push, but she removed the boots that night and left them beside the door. The wind blew hard that week, peeling bark from trees, tearing loose the corners of the old shed roof. The chickens clucked in fear and the mare wouldn't eat. Tom watched the sky darken over the ridge and felt a pressure behind his eyes, not from weather, from memory. On the 30th day she came to him, hands trembling. "They'll come," she whispered. "Not long now." He looked at her then for the first time with real focus. "You running from someone?" he asked. She didn't nod, didn't deny, just said, "They wear black hats with red bands. All of them." He felt the name before she spoke it, but when she did, it landed like thunder under bone. Riders of Black Mill. Tom's blood turned cold. He knew that name, knew the fire behind it, knew the way it had once started with him. The riders of Black Mill weren't outlaws in the usual sense. They didn't rob banks, didn't burn trains. They found broken men and molded them. Lost soldiers, ruined farmers' boys with nothing left but hate and hands good for killing. Silas Grigg made them a family. He gave them black hats with red bands and told them they were chosen. They believed him. That's what made them dangerous. Tom had known Silas once before the gang, before the name. They'd met in a mining town bar full of cheap whiskey and broken lanterns. Tom was younger, hot-blooded, and Levi still alive. Silas had a younger brother than Jacob. Skinny thing. Quick hands, quicker tongue. One night Jacob tried stealing from Miriam's saddlebag. Tom caught him. Words turned to fists. Fists to steel. By the time they pulled Tom off, Jacob was coughing blood and gone before morning. Silas never forgave him. Tom thought he'd buried that fire. Thought isolation and silence were enough penance. But now, standing on his own porch, listening to the woman with the sack describe red bands and hollow eyes, he felt that old wound open again. "They'll kill me," she said, "if they find me." Tom leaned against the railing, staring at the distant ridge. "What did you do?" She shook her head. "Not what I did. What I know." She turned away, then back into the cabin. She didn't explain further. 3 days later they came. 6 of them riding hard through the canyon trail. Dust rose behind them like a thundercloud. Tom saw the red bands before he saw the faces. Silas still led from the front coat, flapping like a black sail shotgun resting across the horn of his saddle. His face was leaner beard gone silver in patches, but the eyes hadn't changed, cold as a wolf at dusk. Tom didn't meet them at the gate. He stood just inside the barn, hand on the rifle he hadn't fired in 6 years. The woman crouched behind hay bales, wrapped in shadows. Her breath was silent, but her hands shook. The riders dismounted slow. One of them, young wiry, looked around with a smirk. "Heard you had company, Callister," he called. That true Tom didn't answer. Silas stepped forward. "Don't lie, Tom." "I always hated that in a man." His voice hadn't lost its drawl. "Girl's ours. She ran from something she shouldn't have. We aim to collect." Tom stepped into the light. His rifle rested at his side. "You don't belong here," he said. Silas laughed. "Neither did Jacob in that grave you put him in." The wind stilled. The horses snorted. A chicken clucked from behind the coop as if sensing the violence stitched into the silence. "She's not yours," Tom said. "She's not yours either," Silas said, eyes narrowing. "And you don't get to play protector. Not after what you done." Another rider moved toward the barn. Tom raised the rifle. "Don't," he warned. The man paused, hand on his belt. Silas held up a hand. "Easy now. No one's shooting yet." He turned his eyes back to Tom. "I'll give you one chance. Walk away. Let her come with us. This time I let you keep the rest of your ranch. Next time I salt the damn earth." Tom didn't move. "You've changed," Silas said. "Or maybe just hiding better." "I burned everything that needed burning," Tom said, voice low. "That's so," Silas grinned. "Let's see what still burns." And then the shot rang out. It wasn't from Tom's rifle. It came from the barn, sharp and desperate. The woman had fired. One of the riders spun back, blood blossoming from his thigh. Screaming, he dropped. Then all hell broke loose. Gunfire shattered the air. Tom ducked behind the well, firing once, twice, his aim true born of memory and grief. Another rider fell. The others scattered, flanking the cabin. Bullets thudded into the porch posts, broke glass. The woman ran. She darted out the barn's rear sack, still tied, feet flying. Silas saw her and gave chase. Tom yelled, surged from cover, caught a bullet in his left shoulder. It spun him but didn't drop him. Blood soaked his shirt, hot and searing. He followed them. The mare was still saddled. Tom mounted one-handed and rode toward the ridge. He could hear Silas shouting ahead, close now. He found them near the cliff's edge. Silas had her by the arm, dragging her backward. "Take it off," he shouted. "I want to see what they're dying for." She fought him, but he was stronger. Tom dismounted, legs buckling. He raised the rifle. "Let her go." Silas turned. The sack slipped, revealing dark hair soaked in sweat, eyes wide and afraid. "You don't know, do you?" Silas barked. "You still don't know what she is?" Tom's grip tightened. "She's my sister," Silas said, laughing. "Little Mercy. She ran off after Jacob died. Couldn't take the guilt. Helped me build everything, then tore it all down when she turned." Tom froze. The woman, the sack, the humming Jacob's song he'd married his enemy's sister. Silas grinned. "There it is." Tom fired. The shot caught Silas in the thigh. He screamed, dropped to one knee. Mercy tore free, ran behind Tom. Silas looked up, pain in his eyes now, and something else. Regret, or just the absence of hate. Tom lowered the rifle. His arm throbbed, blood dripping onto the red dust. "You took my brother," Silas said, "and now you protect mine." Tom didn't answer. Behind him, Mercy whispered, "Please, don't let him take me." Tom stepped forward between her and Silas. "I already did one unforgivable thing," he said. "I won't do another." The wind rose again, and Silas, bleeding, broken, turned and limped away. Two of his men rode down later, collected him. They said nothing, just looked at Tom's wound, at the torn sack in Mercy's hand, and said nothing. They left the land, left the woman, left the man who should have died years ago but didn't. The morning after the fight, the ranch sat scarred. The porch was splintered, the barn door hung crooked bullet holes in the walls like dead eyes staring back. Smoke curled from what was left of the hayloft fire had caught spread quick through the dry straw, and only the storm the night before had spared the whole structure. Tom's wound festered slow. Mercy bound it with strips of linen and willow bark soaked in whiskey. He didn't complain, but every time she touched his skin, he flinched less from pain than from the weight of what he now knew. She hadn't spoken since Silas said her name. Not until the third day. He sat outside staring at the fence line, watching dust devils twist in the distance. She came to him, hands clasped in front of her. "My name is Mercy," she said. He didn't turn. "I didn't lie," she said. "I just didn't remember who I was, not until your fire brought it back." Now he looked at her. "I knew Jacob," she said, "but I hated what he became, and I hated what Silas turned us into. I thought if I ran, I could outrun the blood." "You can't," Tom said quietly. "No," she agreed. "You can't." She sat beside him. He let her. They buried the dead rider by the tree line. No marker, just a mound of dirt and a broken rifle thrust into the earth like a flag. The others hadn't returned, but Tom knew they might. Silas hadn't said it, but that limp meant more than pain. It meant war deferred, not avoided. That night Mercy took off the sack. Not slowly, not shyly. Just lifted it and laid it down on the table. Her face was pale, bruised in old places, a scar along her jaw, lip split once and healed wrong. Her eyes were sharp, not soft, not meek, alive. "You still want me here?" she asked. Tom didn't answer. Just pulled a chair out for her. She sat. They ate in silence. The days that followed carried an edge. Tom saw riders sometimes far off across the ridge, watching, never approaching. He fixed the barn door, re-shingled the porch. Mercy helped. She was quiet but strong, knew the rhythm of work, the price of waiting. Then one afternoon he returned from the gully to find her gone. No boots by the door, no sack on the table, just the sound of wind in the trees. His heart beat like gunfire in his chest. Tracks led north, hoofprints light and fast. One horse, one rider. He saddled his mare and followed. It took him through dusk into the black ribs of Rock Hollow, where the trees grew so close the sky disappeared. There among the pines he found them. Mercy sat beside a campfire, across from her Silas. He stood slowly when he saw Tom. "I didn't take her," Silas said. "She came." Tom dismounted, rifle raised. Why, Mercy stood too. "I came to end it," she said. "One way or another." Silas looked tired. "Older than before. I told her I'd call them off, all of them, if she walked away from you." Tom stared at Mercy. "And I told him no," she said. Silas shrugged. "Then I said I'd kill you both." Silence. "I don't want to," Silas added. "I swear, Tom, but I made a name on blood, and blood demands return." Tom stepped forward. "You already got return. Jacob died for what he did. And you lived for what you did," Silas replied. Tom lowered his rifle. "What now?" he asked. Mercy reached into her coat and pulled something out. A small bag, cloth wrap stained. She handed it to Silas. He opened it. Inside was a medallion, brass tarnished, etched with the symbol of the rider's snake wrapped around a millstone. "It's yours," she said. "I stole it. Thought if I took it I could break it." Silas held it like a relic, then slowly he dropped it into the fire. They watched it blacken, then melt. Silas looked up, and there was something in his face that hadn't been there before. "We're done," he said. And he turned, mounted, rode away into the dark. Tom stood beside the fire, the melted brass still hissing. Mercy looked at him. "That was all I had." "No," he said. "You got more than that." She looked at him, then full eyes steady. "You'd still have me." He nodded. A beat passed between them, then she stepped close, took his hand, laid it on her chest. Her heart beat steady. They rode back at dawn. The ranch still stood. He tore down the broken boards, rebuilt the barn frame. She helped him hand in hand. The chickens laid again. The mare foaled at last, a thin-legged colt with wide eyes. They never spoke of the fire again, or Jacob or Silas, but Mercy sang. Not the old song, not the one of revenge. This one was new. It rose over the hills in the mornings and echoed down the gully like peace returned in sound. It was a name like ash falling into a wound. Mercy Grigg. When she first spoke it, Tom froze. Not from fear, from recognition. The kind that eats through the walls of a man's silence and finds the room he boarded up years ago. They stood in the cabin, her voice still ringing soft as threadbare cloth. Outside the land waited, the birds quiet, the wind unsure. I didn't lie to you, she said, but I didn't tell you either. Not until I knew who you were. Tom sat slowly, hand pressed against his shoulder where the bullet wound had knitted tight. And when did you know? When you looked at me like you were carrying ghosts, she said. Like a man who knew what he took from the world and wasn't done paying. She stepped closer, no longer hiding her face. She looked different now. Not younger, more exposed. Wounds shone freely, scars like open letters. You killed Jacob, she said, no hatred in her tone. But you didn't murder him. Tom didn't flinch. Doesn't change the end. No, she agreed. But I watched him twist. Watched him pull others down with him. He would have burned this land if you hadn't stopped him. Tom looked down at his hands, those blackened, fire-warped things. I still lit the match. Mercy knelt before him. Silas made you a villain because grief needs an enemy. He turned Jacob into a martyr. But he never told you the rest. Tom lifted his gaze. Jacob had a letter, she said. He wrote it the night before he died. Apologizing. Saying he stole from your wife. Said he knew he deserved worse than prison. That he was tired of lying to Silas. Said he wanted to run away, start clean. He never sent it. Why are you telling me this now? Because I need you to know, she said, voice cracking. That when you killed him, you didn't destroy something good. You destroyed something already dying. Tom stood, walked to the window. The wind stirred dry grass like fingers over paper. Why come here? Why now? I didn't know where else to go, she said. I ran from Silas. I ran from what I helped him build. I ran until I forgot my own name. And then I met you. He turned back to her eyes hollow. I didn't deserve to find you, she said. Not after what my family did to yours. Tom stepped forward slowly, took something from the mantel, a child's toy horse carved by hand, Levi's name etched underneath. My son never got to choose, he said. He died coughing on smoke. Mercy lowered her head. But if he could see me now, Tom continued, voice like gravel and smoke, I think he'd want me to stop burning too. She looked up, and in her eyes was the same grief he carried, the same guilt, the same thread of something else, hope fragile as spider silk. He reached into the drawer and pulled out the small silver ring, blackened, misshapen, Miriam's ring. He held it between them. I carry ghosts, he said, but I'm ready to carry something else too. She didn't cry, just nodded. That night they buried the ring beside the old oak where Miriam and Levi's names were carved into the trunk. Tom pressed the earth flat with his bare hand. Mercy stood beside him, sack in one hand, the other resting on his back. They said nothing. Let the wind speak for them. In the morning they walked the property. The sun rose slow, casting long shadows that felt less like threats and more like promises. As they passed the broken fence, Mercy paused. There's something else, she said. Tom stopped. The medallion I gave Silas, I didn't steal it, he frowned. I forged it, she said, years ago, back when the riders were nothing but dust and rage. I designed the snake, the millstone, I carved the name. She looked at him then. I was the first. Tom's face hardened. I wasn't just part of it, she said. I was the reason it spread, the songs, the symbols. I built the myth. She dropped her gaze. I started the fire before you ever struck a match. Tom's throat felt dry. He turned away, stared at the hills. You married into the enemy, she said, barely a whisper. No, he replied after a long silence. I married what's left of a broken thing, same as you did. He turned back to her. We both lived in that fire too long. He reached out. She stepped forward. They held each other there in the red dawn light as the land warmed under them and the past cracked just enough to let something grow. That night Mercy took the sack and folded it, placed it in a wooden box, nailed it shut, buried it behind the barn, and never wore it again. They married on a Tuesday morning with no preacher, no witnesses, and no white dress. Just the wind, the mare, and the sound of chickens clucking nearby like they knew something sacred had changed. Tom carved 2 rings from a length of copper wire he found behind the old stove. They weren't polished. They weren't perfect. But they fit. Mercy stood barefoot in the grass. Her hands were no longer wrapped, her face no longer hidden. She wore a faded green dress she found in a trunk, stiff with age but soft at the hem. Tom stood beside her in his only shirt that didn't carry blood or soot. His scarred hands trembled slightly as he reached for hers. "You sure?" he asked. She nodded. He nodded too. That was all. They exchanged no vows, none were needed. The land had already heard the promises, and the silence between them carried more weight than any spoken words. Afterward they sat on the porch. She leaned against his shoulder. The wind moved through the tall grass like it was drawing something in the dirt, something gentle, slow. Tom smoked his pipe, the same one he'd put away after the fire and hadn't touched in 6 years. Now it tasted like something new. The mare gave birth again come summer, a strong colt with a white blaze shaped like a flame. They named him Ember. The fence line held. The chickens laid steady. The barn, half scorched, remained standing. Tom left it that way, blackened wood beside new beams, a monument to ruin and repair. Mercy sang often. Not every morning, but enough that the hills remembered her voice. Sometimes she sang to the trees, sometimes to Levi's marker, sometimes just to the silence itself. At night, she'd sit with Tom by the stove, her head resting on his shoulder, and he'd run one hand across her scar as if learning it like Braille. She told him stories, slowly over weeks, about the early days with Silas, the dream they had before it curdled, the nights she'd cried while carving the medallions, the way she'd felt her soul shrinking every time a man wore one with pride. Tom listened. Sometimes he'd speak, sometimes he wouldn't. But he always stayed beside her. They didn't pretend to be clean, didn't chase peace as if it owed them anything, but they found something better. Stillness, forgiveness, and the knowledge that sometimes a ruined man and a hunted woman could carry enough pieces of themselves to build something that resembled a home. The sack stayed buried behind the barn. A wooden marker above it with nothing carved. Just one copper ring nailed to its face, gleaming in the sun. Sometimes the wind still smells of smoke. Sometimes the sky still bruises before it breaks. But on this land, in this silence, something once burned now blooms again. A woman sings, a man listens, and a boy's name lives on in the whisper of leaves. And in the dust, folded and forgotten, the sack lies quiet. So if you pass through Dell Hollow and see a mare with a flame-marked colt near the ridge, know that you've brushed the edge of something true. Not legend, not miracle, just 2 souls burned clean who dared to begin again. They say she still sings at dawn and that he never left her side again. No markers, no stories told loud, just a folded sack behind a barn, and the soft echo of a name once feared, now only remembered by the wind. Watch the next story to hear what the dust remembers next. Subscribe for more tales from the quiet West.